I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I think what your expertise and your observations in this space, G20 and particularly W20, would be very insightful for the larger global South feminists and women who just see the communique and don't know the process and challenges and opportunity and things like that. So thank you,
Yes,
Nadia.
yes.
Thank you for taking the time. W20 is huge.
It is.
And you heading it in South Africa must have been amazing. So why don't we start with have you been involved with W20 right from the beginning, where it was conceptualized in Turkey and almost 10 years ago?
Yeah, 10 whole years ago. Unfortunately not, but I've been involved since Argentina. So that was prior to COVID. My very first meeting was in Argentina. It was really an incredible experience. And I actually got into it via my involvement with BRICS. So it was just a strange coincidence. And I was also involved in the Think 20 at that time. But I decided that I wanted to contribute more towards women's issues and women's rights and women's empowerment. So I've been busy with it since then. And so I felt, I was quite prepared, but you never, ever know what it's going to be like until you actually do it. But I think it's really, really great that South Africa chaired the G20 and the W20 this year. It's almost as if it was meant to happen. I mean, besides it being first time on African continent, and also, part of the succession of the global South. So Indonesia to India to Brazil to South Africa, which is IBSA. And it's been a difficult year, but I think South Africa we've stood our ground as South Africans, and we've stuck to our constitutional identity and done, I think, really under the circumstances, an incredible job. And so I feel proud. We still have the G20 Social Summit next week.
Right.
And we don't know what to expect with the Leaders Summit, but I still think it's been a worthwhile journey.
Yeah. And the global governance, of course, right now, the politics of it is who's coming and who's not, is where with Trump doing all kinds of drama and talking about. But sure. So since you got involved, how you see this journey of W20, like particularly, last 4 years being in Global South, what has shifted and what has been the challenges?
Well, I recall we met in Indonesia and you were making some inputs around civil society, being more involved in W20. And I think that that's actually what's happened over the last 4 years. The Global South influence has certainly been more of a push to make it relevant, to make W20 relevant, to get as many voices in as possible. I mean, India did a massive job of getting a whole lot of women on board. Brazil did the same thing, including indigenous women. And this year we did a youth outreach. So I think the one thing that's really changed quite a bit is just that focus. But we also had because it's the 10-year anniversary, we had a study done for us by the Harvard Kennedy School Women's Alumni Network on 10 years of W20. And it was incredible to see the impact that it's had. They used data from the Women, Business and Law at the World Bank and looked at what Women20 has been talking about, how things have changed in terms of the priority areas, how the leaders have taken this up, and then if there's been any implementation any impact on the ground. So it's a beautiful report to read, and there has been impact. But for me, probably the most interesting thing is a change in focus. So if you followed it, I mean, initially it was really women's empowerment in terms of financial inclusion and entrepreneurship. That was the I think Turkey really put that on the table. And obviously the Brisbane goals with the employment and the workplace and pay gaps and so on. But over the years, and especially with the Global South, we've brought in more social aspects of it, but obviously emphasizing that these social aspects have major economic consequences. So if we don't deal with gender-based violence and femicide, our economies aren't going to grow. We're not going to have healthy societies. We're not going to have healthy communities. It's bad for the GDP, if you want to put it in economic terms. If you don't have women leading with climate change action, which we're not seeing much of at COP20 again this year, it's not good for the economy. So that's the message, because we're speaking to finance ministers and leaders, but we have brought these kind of pressing issues that affect women's lives onto the agenda, besides just your traditional stuff. And that's been difficult because the cultural differences between different countries and what they consider to be issues that should be on the W20 agenda or not. But I think there's generally, well, we've had consensus every year for the last 10 years. There have been some sticking points, and those sticking points are usually around women's health and how we articulate that. And in the last few years, we've had issues around gender-based violence and femicide. You know, sort of disagreement about femicide being foregrounded as a crime and a crisis, and gender-based violence based on this kind of pushback we're seeing now against gender equality and gender rights. So we had a bit of an issue. We almost didn't reach consensus. One or two countries were particularly not fond of the strong gender angle, but we eventually did reach consensus, and we spoke about violence against all women and girls. Unfortunately, even the UN women's wording of women and girls in all their diversity was not sufficient, you know, to reach consensus. So it's not easy, because you have your own, I mean, you have your own beliefs and your own feminisms and you have your country's position, and then you have to recognize sovereignty. As you know, from BRICS, that's really important.
Right.
So all of this needs to be navigated, and but ultimately, I think what we came up with was something that was really important and really impactful.
That's great. You know, one thing which I noticed, I think in the last, particularly it being with Global South input, is the whole focus on unpaid and care work.
Yes.
That every communique, and it made it into in India, I remember it was part of the main declaration of G20.
Yeah. The paid and unpaid care work is probably the biggest success story that we've had over the past few years. And I think it kind of like, it had germinations in Indonesia. As you said, went through the Indian presidency, but Brazil really pushed hard. Because they were working with the Global Alliance for Care, and the momentum was there. So we took that forward into our work, and we developed it further. So I think that's specifically, and I have some policy briefs to share with you, including one on paid and unpaid care. But there was also a little bit of a pushback around unpaid care. But we managed to navigate that. So there's this impression that unpaid care shouldn't be seen in economic terms, because it's kind of like, I think
Wifely
Argentina called
duty.
it
Yeah.
a holy duty. Yes.
Yes, of
So
course.
yeah, we've just heard that Malay is not coming to South Africa either for the Leader Summit, and that's where most of the pushback happened. So Argentina, for example, stopped consensus in the ministerial track with the Women's Empowerment Working Group. They had to issue a chairperson statement, precisely because of two things: gender equality and the issue of unpaid care. They didn't, and of course then the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think everybody finds quite strange. They've been around for a long time. And I mean, there was a lot of work to get to where we are in terms of that. So, but as I mentioned, I'm from a W20 perspective. I think the care work agenda is one of the biggest success stories we've had
I agree.
creating awareness, in getting people to understand the importance of this invisible work that's being done throughout society. Yeah.
Right. And that happened because of the four Global South presidency, one after the other. So it got built upon each other. And I think Brazil did a great job. But I heard, of course, Brazil discussion with Argentina was very challenging throughout, or at all levels, for sure. I also saw there's something now, Johannesburg Action Plan, and Brisbane has been converted into Joburg.
So yes, so we thought we have to do something. The goals need to be updated, and we weren't going to be we didn't want to hold back on that. So there was a lot of debate, but we spoke to UN Women and to the ILO about it, and so we settled on 35 by 35. So the Brisbane goals being updated, labor force participation being increased by 35% by 2035. But then we also included the wage gap should be reduced by 35% by 2035. And then the one that really was a win was unpaid care work gap reduced. Yeah. So that I'm very happy it's there. I don't know if the leaders, you never know what the leaders are going to do. I don't know if they're going to put it in their declaration, but I think that was a really good thing to do. And I hope that somehow we can take it forward.
Yes. And it's good. Like, it is there in the W20 communique. So even if it, let's keep our fingers crossed that it comes out in the summit declaration. But even if it doesn't, it is documented officially as a W20 communique. So it can't be ignored. It puts the responsibility on the following W20s to continue along that line, for sure.
Yeah, which is the scary part, because we don't know
it's going to go to US.
What's going to happen?
We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen, and then keep our fingers crossed. But that's global politics. We don't know what's going to happen, for sure. One of the things I think, as we are talking about all these achievements, one of the things I know in our circles we have talked extensively is about it's only rhetoric, it's on paper, it doesn't get implemented, and there's no monitoring. So we are not able to hold states accountable to these commitments that they make. So what do you think about that? And have the needle shifted or moved even? I know we were all talking about creating all these better mechanisms and implementation and accountability processes.
Two of the most important things: implementation and accountability, for sure. I mean, I think the report that we did tracing impact over the last 10 years for W20 at least gave us a baseline of some sort. to work from. So we'd like to continue to do this, to continue to measure, I mean, as scientifically as possible, to measure, let's say, the unpaid care work, the impact of that, pushing that as a policy agenda. And I think that we have recommended in the chapeau of the communique that there be better mainstreaming, more accountability, and we can't do the work if we don't have the disaggregated data.
Right.
So ultimately, that is something that, but we've been, I mean, that's been happening since the beginning, and there's still not been sufficient response. I think because we're relying on national statistics offices to share the data and the disaggregated data, that's one of the more difficult parts, because it's difficult to measure and then difficult to hold leaders accountable if you don't have the information that you need to do it. So that's a challenge. Yeah.
What was the aha moment for you in this whole South African W20? I'm sure there must be many, but if you could share a few, like, it's a huge achievement. I'm sure you had sleepless night, and how the coordination process, it's very big. And and then what were some of the we did it kind of those moments?
So aha was really being able to do it with restricted resources. So that was always a worry, in that we were constantly trying to scratch around for money, because the governments don't fund engagement groups. And we have the B20 within the G20, and all the private sector actors put their money there. So we were very fortunate to get money from the German Development Agency and the Canadians. That kind of like gave us the seeds to actually do what we needed to do, because ultimately you need funding. So being able to do it on a very strict budget, but not only money, we're volunteers. So the human resource side of it, getting people to feel passionate enough to push it through. And so that was, it's possible, people are willing to donate their time. They're willing to put the effort in. And I love that about working with the W20 delegates across the G20, but particularly our group of 13 delegates in South Africa, from business, from civil society, from academia. It was an incredible experience, really. But I think the best part, actually this morning, I had a meeting with a Ghanaian woman who lives in Scotland, who was at the summit. And she was talking to me about her work on Ubuntu, and which was our value, and non-racism in Scotland, and how when she came to the summit, it was the very first time in her life that she'd ever felt Ubuntu. And that was like, wow. That was incredible, absolutely incredible. We had people from all over the world in the room, a really diverse group of women, but with a common purpose, I think. And that is really, we know that women's rights are under threat. So the only thing that we can do is just to stand strong, and everybody respects the South African Constitution, unless they're crazy right-wing. So there's this respect for the Constitution. There's a respect for our human rights culture, despite all the stories that are being told about the country that are just absolute nonsense. So that feeling, that was like the best feeling. And we had quite a nice creative angle to things. So we had a beautiful song that we now have as our W20 anthem. We had Yvonne Shaka Shaka, who's a very well-known artist, beautiful singer who was with us. So it was very, very special in many ways. You know, when you do something like this, though, you're so tired by the time you get to the event, you can't even really soak everything in. It's like I tell people, it was like my wedding. You know, I couldn't enjoy the day because I had been working so hard for everything to be, you know, to work. But I mean, in retrospect and hearing people's stories and the way that they felt is very gratifying.
Right. It's incredible. The first, you know, it's the first G20 on African continent, and also after African Union became a full member of G20. So you must be having a lot of African, besides, of course, even beyond South Africa, who must have participated for the first time involved in the whole this process, which is...
That was the other exciting part. And that was precisely that. Having an African values approach embedded, the African agenda, which has always been the international relations agenda of South Africa, well, not always, but since 1994, the international relations agenda of South Africa has been based on Ubuntu and friendship to the world, as our first democratic president, Nelson Mandela, called it, you know. So, and we had women from across Africa, North Africa, Southern Africa, East and West, coming from their various backgrounds, and bringing their networks along with them, because of course it's not just one woman sitting there. There's so many other people that are reached like that. So we really did put an emphasis on Africa and on bringing African women to the table, and I think that was also very appreciated.
Yeah, I'm sure it must be a very rich experience, experiencing that in South Africa. So I know you shared a little bit on the challenges. You want to unpack a little more, that what were some of the challenges, or let's put it, what were some of the learnings?
The learnings,
what you observe and you're like, okay, this was...
I think the learnings are, you know, just that diplomacy is a very valuable tool that you need to wield carefully. So,
and we as feminists cannot have to learn it eventually.
You know, eventually you have to say, okay, I'm an activist at heart, but in this situation, sometimes I must just, you know, and be patient and continue to just work towards an outcome that would be satisfying to everyone, but not compromising too much. So, you know, you need that delicate balance. So, and that's something that not everybody can do. And especially people who haven't been involved in these kinds of things before. So a lot of the South African delegates, for instance, had very little experience with this, but they've come out of it with a lot of experience.
But you know, we as Global South feminists, Narnia, we are loud, we are vocal, we are passionate. We cannot be contained. Like, it's not South Africa. It's a Global South. You look at Latin American, you look at us in India, maybe we are all the same.
But I mean, that's the beauty of it, because one of our icons within Women20 is Mabel Bianco.
Yes,
and Mabel is our activist. So our real, you know, somebody who spent 50, 60 years of her life doing this. And she teaches everyone how to be passionate about things, but also when to say, let's try and find a solution that's not going to be too much of a compromise. So we have some amazing women like that within the delegations who have the experience to like take us by the hand and go,
right.
you know, let's because, you know, we don't, not all of us are feminists within W20.
Yeah,
Not
of
all
course.
of us are
Of course.
activists within
Of
W20.
course.
So,
Of course.
and we some people work with their governments very closely, others don't. So the Argentinian delegation, for instance, didn't stand with their government's position. And so that helped us to get the consensus that we needed to get. So we're very thankful for that the delegates that we had and the people who were in the room really cared enough to make it work. I think the biggest challenge really is that we don't want the work that we've done to come to naught. So, I mean, the impression that's been created is that the US is not going to have any engagement groups. So we need to find the momentum to go into the UK, because, I mean, the UK has already made it clear that they're just going to go back to the same, you know, formula that we're using currently. But it's very unlikely. So the problem with this is if the engagement groups aren't institutionalized within the G20, the money will not be there for us to do what we need to do. And that's the risk that we're facing, is that it will just be something that's put on the shelf, and you know, we'll take up the cudgels again in 2027, which is it's a risk because we've all put so much into it.
Yeah. And what's the reaction from the US civil society around this? Like, if it's engagement group, it is all the engagement group, right? It's not just the Women20, it is the labor, the you know, the civil society,
it's all
all of them, right? So
you know, I don't know, in the spaces that we're in, I mean, our US delegates also don't follow the MAGA line, so we didn't have any challenges there. But I think there doesn't seem to be much of a culture, and anyone from the US can contradict me here, but a culture of real activism from, well, not that I'm seeing personally, you know, I'm seeing people.
They are not engaged in this space. I'm sure the US civil society is quite engaged in, you know, butting their heads against Trump and its administration on various policies, including
but
foreign
not in
policy.
this space.
But not in this space, maybe. Yeah.
It's more, well, I mean, for me, it's like more diplomatic, and less of a real push against MAGA. But I think it is just the space. I mean, I've seen the protests, but it just seems to be missing somehow where we are at the moment. So there's unhappiness and people are nervous, but I think they're more nervous than angry, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because he's a bully. He can do anything.
So you don't know, people are losing their jobs on a daily basis. So a lot of people are also afraid to talk.
Right. It's rather unfortunate. So I think we keep our fingers crossed. We don't know what happens next year, but what would be your advice going forward to passing the baton on? If it's not US, it goes to UK next.
I think just to continue to build on the Global South agenda, because the Global South agenda is good for everyone.
Correct. I am with you. You have my vote.
Okay. So not to just just to move away from or beyond the Global South agenda, but actually to see the value in what has been done and to build on that. And also to take the whole the African agenda forward as well, because there's so many issues that we need to deal with on the continent, debt being the biggest one at the moment, you know, the one that people are speaking about the most at the moment.
But it doesn't get through. It gets so diluted in the actual declaration.
It does.
I saw it in India. It got tabled, but it didn't go anywhere. It was so diluted.
No.
So was the climate. I was so disappointed with India on climate.
I'm afraid that the climate might very well be diluted now, despite South Africa really pushing for climate justice. You know, that how strong it's going to be in the leaders' declaration, I don't know. And it would be a pity, because all of the engagement groups put a real emphasis on that.
I'm sure.
So,
I'm sure.
you know, it was really a concerted effort to put the issues on the table. Obviously, from our perspective, you know, with regards to the role of women and girls, the leadership of women, and so on. But it is possible that I don't know. I mean, in this day and age, with all the science that we have at our disposal, not to be taking this more seriously is extremely disturbing. But I think we just have to continue with our advocacy and build on the calls for accountability, but try and find the right accountability mechanisms.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very good. Very good thinking. We can, if I may, also, since I have the opportunity, get your thoughts around the G20 Feminist Watch. I know we've been playing with the idea for a few years. You know, I first talked about it during Germany's presidency, when I met with our BRICS partners over there, and we talked about, well, we have BRICS Feminist Watch, so whether we form a BRICS Feminist Watch within G20, or we call it a G20 Feminist Watch, or, you know. So Narnia, you should think about and bring people, and I'll be happy to support in whatever way, even if we pick like one goal, that this is our one vision, or we just hammer it.
Start small, because I mean, there's so much of a need for it within G20, and especially now with all the backlash and that's going on in the world. So we need to learn from what you've done. And, you know, just call it multilateral feminist watch. But I do think it's necessary. It's just, I know how much work it is, and I know how long it takes to build something, and how restricted resources are. So it would be good to just start with something small. And then, like you say, especially since we don't know what's going to be happening in 2026.
Yeah, thank you for doing all this work, Narnia. Appreciate that. I know it's a lot of work, and you're still smiling, which is incredible.
I wasn't smiling 2 weeks ago. I was so exhausted. But I think that, you know, speaking about it like this really brings it home, that it was all worth it.
No, it is. It's and it's all there. No one can take it away. They may not acknowledge it, but it will always be there for us to build up from there. So thank you for all the hard work that all you and your colleagues and others have done.
Thank you.
W20.
And thank you for your acknowledgement and your recognition. It matters. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to us collaborating.
That would be good.
Soon.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We must keep in touch. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Priti.